Hey, nice to see you. I'm here at the Provo River, enjoying distance, but not really distance from you because I miss you all. And as Governor Cuomo of New York was talking about this morning, we're emotional beings and we need togetherness. And so one of the hardest parts of this quarantining and social distancing is the lack of that being together. I wanted to be at the river in part just because I wanted to be somewhere besides in a classroom, and certainly than a cemetery where I was last time. But I want you to think about the fact that this rushing river is coming from the snow in the mountains. There's so much buildup of coldness and the confusion that there is in a snowstorm. But the sun comes out and it melts off, and it's this river that flows. And that's what we're all going to experience, is the runoff and the flow of this period of time. Governor Cuomo again this morning made a couple other observations I thought I'd mention to you. One, he talks about the snow globe that we've all experienced in winter, Christmas time. You shake it up, and that's what's happened to our world now. But we know all of those flakes will settle. And the winter of our discontent will be made glorious summer. Maybe not by summer, but soon. And so, as Cuomo said, he said, in the span of our lives, most of our lives, we're talking about this period being this. And we can get through this. In the span of history of the world, of course, it's nothing. You can't even begin to measure it. I think of the Black Death. I think of the Spanish flu. I think of AIDS. This is nothing so huge except perhaps in our common response to it. All right, enough sermonizing. We've been dealing with so many things till now: tuning systems, and key characteristics, choral scores, hypotext, hypertext with respect to popular music, piano scores of different kinds, instrumental scores from single instruments to chamber, to orchestral, to band. Now we're going into this last unit about which I was overviewing last time. So I'm sending you a packet introducing this concept of specialized scores. And so I want to just go through that with you today. The first page of it looks like this. Specialized scores. Well, specialized in these particular ways. These are scores different from any that we've looked at before. And I put them in these four categories. On the left-hand side of the page, it says before the fact. On the right-hand side, it says after the fact. What you should be asking is, well, what's the fact? The fact is the regular score that we're used to, what we think of as a score. Before the fact, we have sketches and short scores. Sketches could be any kind of indication of what a piece is going to be like in its shapes, its contours, its textures and densities and so forth. I brought a few examples here. Here's one from a student, for example. Asked the student to sketch out his next piece, and this is what he brought me. And this is great. This is a perfect kind of sketch. You're showing all these different things that are going to happen in the music. And it's very similar to the things you see in this page, which is the next page in your packet, from Augusta Reed Thomas. More sketches of hers in a minute. So this is from one of our students. He said, here's my piece. This is what I'm going to be writing. This is before the fact of the actual score. Look at this one. This is from our old friend, good friend, Dr. Hicks. And these are sketches for Beyond the Zero, one of his pieces. I've got here some others that I got from an auction site, because they actually auction off the sketches of famous composers, Augusta Reed Thomas being one of them. I don't know if you know her, but she's a fabulous composer who's still alive. And here's one sketch of hers. This is just, of course, not the real thing, but a printout of it. The original of this sketch, which does have a lot of notes on it and so forth that we think of traditional note heads and so on, that was priced at $1,000. Here's another one of hers. It's a little more picturesque. As you can see here, it's sort of showing left to right the kinds of things that will be happening, again, in terms of density and motion. Well, that one for sale at this particular site was $1,350. And this one, this is the best of them, I suppose. This one they're selling for $5,000 for her sketch. For her sketch. I don't know if anyone paid that or not, but it happens. It's the before the fact of the score that people actually come to know, and from which a conductor will work and so forth. So I have a few examples here on this page. The next thing in this before the fact layout is short scores. The idea of a short score is, as you see here, fewer lines and full scores. The instruments are noted beside the musical ideas, so a staff line may have a number of different instruments on it, and the instrumentation will be written next to the notation of pitch and rhythm. Now, what is the purpose of doing these? Well, it could be for expansion. It's a way of saying, laying things out, saying, I'll put this in a regular score format soon. It could be for conducting. You could conduct particularly a quick ensemble that you're trying to get together for. Very often in the case of film scores, we don't have a lot of time. I'm going to use this short score to conduct from. And you can make parts from a short score as well. So those things are noted here on this page. Those are the uses of this. I put some examples here. These are all from soundtrack scores, essentially from the 1950s and 1960s. I just want you to look at these and see how they're laid out. You've got treble staves, bass staves, but the instrumentation is written beside the notes themselves. Here's another page. Nowadays, you may or may not find these in a manuscript format. It used to be that you could tell a short score because it was handwritten. But nowadays, composers will often work directly on their computers, so that the score is instantaneously computer engraved. So the nature of short scores has changed, and the look of them as well. Now, you can see on this page, the sort of opening page of this packet, that you have right of the term short scores, reductions. The reason they're sitting next to each other is that they overlap. They actually look the same. You can't necessarily tell whether something is a short score or a reduction, at least certain kinds of reductions. It used to be you could tell because reductions would be computer engraved or somehow printed out to be published. And short scores were manuscript. They were handwritten. Nowadays, as I say, you can't really tell that. But reductions are where you cut the number of lines or other parameters in order to rehearse choral, vocal, solo, and so on, particularly with concertos. Some of you have practiced those and you have an accompanist who's playing the orchestral part. Well, you're never going to get the orchestra as your accompanist until just before the performance of that concerto. You know this, a number of you in our class right now have certainly had that experience. And also for analysis. You reduce things down so that you can analyze. I'll show you examples in just a second. It says including Schenker. More on that in a moment. So the next page I point out to you here is actually this Harker score thing. I'm not quite sure what I had in mind there. This is really more of a transcription, so it's a little bit out of order, at least in the packet I'm looking at. This one here, structural functions of the set. You can see this is Webern Opus 21. So this is the opening few systems of Webern's Symphony Opus 21, but not looking like an orchestral score the way it's actually published, but rearranged, looking kind of like a short score with the instrumentation written next to the notes so that you can analyze, in this case, the 12-tone row forms that are being used. Let's see what's next here in the packet. Oh yes, so that Schenker thing. Some of you have even taken Schenker analysis as a course. I've never taken a Schenker course. I know a fair amount about the notation. This is a nice layout of a Schenker, sometimes called reduction. It's for the purpose of analysis. Now Schenker, Heinrich Schenker, you can read about him, his history and so on. He had a sort of almost religious and cultish devotion to showing how the work of great masters was reducible to a basic format. You can see here at the top of this, 2 lines, the upper line over the course of an entire piece goes 3, 2, 1. Re, mi, do. And, sorry, mi, re, do. I'm so good at my solfege. Next, on the bottom, the bass line is this do, sol, do. So 1, 5, 1. And he felt that there was something you could find. This was the well, it says on here, the Ursatz, the Grundsatz, the thing that is the essence behind all tonal music. You could reduce it that way. And so he would go through a series of reductions from the original score to this one, to one other level, to this one, so forth. When you see this kind of notation, and you see it in all kinds of textbooks, even, you know, freshman theory textbooks sometimes nowadays, where you have note heads being tied together, particularly open note heads that are, well, just take a look at this page, and you can look up online Schenker reductions or Schenker analysis to get a sense of the look of this particular kind of reduction. Okay? This is another one here. This is from the Schoenberg violin concerto. There's some things about this that tell you the piano part is a reduction of an orchestral score. When you have these sort of extra smaller staves inserted, trying to show you here's some other things happening, the pianist can't play all this stuff. at the same time. So these are cues from the orchestra. There are things that are particularly Schoenberg-esque about this. I'll just say a little sidebar to this. He had a natural or a flat or a sharp next to every note in the score, so it was totally clear what is being played, and you're not worried about, is this accidental carrying over to the next appearance of that pitch, and so forth. You can see at the bottom here, the violin enters, and it has an H there with a bracket on it for Hauptstimme. That's another Schoenberg thing from his 12-tone works, that it means the principal voice, the Hauptstimme. And so he'd show that with an H with a bracket on it. So if you see something with an H with a bracket on it, pretty much you know that's a Schoenberg thing. Also reinforced by this practice of having an accidental sharp, natural, or flat next to every pitch in the piece. His students did that as well. We know Beskval, Berg, and Webern doing that, but it didn't really catch on very much. The next category is represented on this next page, I think. Going back to our master sheet here. Transcriptions. Moving from one medium to another, including recording to score, for performance in another medium, or for analysis. This page actually, this has a transcriptive element to it here. This is from my book, 60s Rock. I'm just showing what they were playing, excuse me, what they were playing in this particular live performance of Light My Fire. The Doors were playing this, and I was using it for analytical purposes. This page that I was showing you beforehand from Dr. Harker shows transcriptions of different solos, Louis Armstrong. This particular page here, Brigham Young's Funeral March, I can't remember if we did this a little bit earlier in the class as an example, but this is for purely commemorative purposes. I don't know who would be sitting and playing Brigham Young's Funeral March at home for entertainment, but it's a way of having this thing as a documentation of a very important moment, 1877, in the lives of Latter-day Saints. So this is for piano, but it would have originally been played by a band or orchestra of some kind. I don't remember the exact details of that. If you go online, IMSLP, and you look up a particular piece, in this case Beethoven Symphony No. 5, it will show you, oh, there's all these different kinds of scores of this. These are different transcriptions, and again, many of you have played transcriptions of pieces where the instrumentation was different originally. This one you can see the complete score for flute, violin, cello, and piano. And it gives you the arranger there of that. For violin, cello, piano, 4 hands. 2 pianos, 8 hands, so on. And then the examples I give after that in the packet show you the opening of the second movement of the Fifth Symphony in its original score, and then the Franz Liszt solo piano transcription of that, and then one of these, the 2 piano versions. Liszt was the show-off. He wanted to do all the Beethoven symphonies just as a solo performer, but most of the transcriptions you'll see are of this sort for 2 pianos. Now, I hope that you're feeling a little fuzzy about these last 2 transcriptions, reductions. it's actually more confusing when you get into the literature and what's on the title pages of these. The term in the 19th century was very often arrangement, arranged for this or that, or arrangement for two pianos, etc. It's not consistent. We don't use the term arrangement so much in that way now, because an arrangement tends to be, well, at least the way we think of it is, you're really recomposing certain aspects of the piece. These are not doing that. You might have to leave out a line here or there, or add a doubling bass or something, but you're not modulating. You're not throwing in something now in a different register than it was before, like a radically different register. You know how arrangements work, especially when it comes to choral arrangements that you would sing in a choir, say a ward choir, doing an arrangement of a particular hymn. So look at the things that are written on that opening page, the uses of these. Understand that reductions, transcriptions, it's a fuzzy area there, but I think you'll be fine on the upcoming test of those, seeing, okay, this is such and such, or these are the uses of such and such. That's what I'm after. I hope you have a great rest of the day with some rest involved, and I intend that too, and I may just sit here by this river for a while longer. Miss you all. Bye.